So let us talk about Canada. Because apparently, some people still do. You all know that it's legal to be gay there. Hello, everyone! I'm here to talk about country risk for LGBT people around the world. And today, we're talking about Canada. As always, this is an installment of my weekly series where we look at the risks for LGBT people around the world. The series started as a response to the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando in June 26th and continues because there is still a lot of homophobia and transphobia in the world. And I want to raise awareness of the issue so that we can work towards a better future. Today's video is different from the typical format. Typically, I will cover a country's legal protections, social attitudes, as well as safety concerns for LGBT people living there. But since Canada has been such a trailblazer when it comes to LGBT rights, I thought I would take a slightly different approach. This video is not intended to be comprehensive, but rather celebrates the progress Canada has made and the good things that are happening there. So before we get into everything that's great about Canada, how many LGBT Canadians are there? Well, Statistics Canada reports that about 4 million Canadians identify as LGBT, which is about 10% of the Canadian population. About 52% of that population are female, 45% are male, and 3% identify as non-binary or prefer not to say. Now let's talk about what's great about Canada. So first, marriage equality. Canada was one of the first countries in the world to introduce marriage equality. Same-sex marriage has been legal across the country since July 2005. In fact, 2 guys were married in Vancouver just 2 weeks later. Adoption by same-sex couples is also legal across Canada. All provinces and territories allow for both joint adoptions by same-sex couples as well as for single people. Speaking of recognition, Canada was also among the first countries to recognize non-binary and gender-diverse people across the country. Government-issued documentation such as passports and driver licenses allow for a third gender marker beyond male and female. Medical transition is also widely available across the country. In fact, Canada's national healthcare system covers medically necessary treatments for transgender Canadians, including hormone replacement therapy and gender affirmation surgery. That's not something that all countries do. Another thing that's great about Canada is anti-discrimination laws. Canada has strong anti-discrimination laws which prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity in areas such as employment, housing, and public accommodations. These laws apply across the country and help to ensure that LGBT Canadians are treated equally under the law. However, despite these protections, systemic discrimination and prejudice still exists in Canada. So next, let's talk about social acceptance. Canada is often ranked as one of the most LGBT-friendly countries in the world due to its progressive laws and policies, as well as its overall social attitudes. There are numerous organizations in Canada that advocate for the rights of LGBT people, such as the Canadian Centre for Gender and Sexual Diversity, which provides resources and support to LGBT youth across the country. Visibility is important. You see LGBT people in the media, in politics, and in the corporate world. For example, there have been several high-profile LGBT politicians in Canada, including NDP MP Randall Garrison, who was the first openly gay federal politician elected in Canada, and Liberal MP Marco Mendicino, who is the current Minister of Public Safety and the first openly gay person to serve in a Canadian cabinet. In terms of corporations, many of Canada's largest companies have diversity programs in place to promote the inclusion of LGBT employees. The federal government has also introduced initiatives to promote gender equality and the rights of transgender people. For example, in 2017, the government launched the Gender Equality and 2 SLGBTQ Action Plan, which includes measures to address the specific needs of transgender and non-binary Canadians. Despite these positive developments, it is important to note that LGBT Canadians continue to face discrimination and violence based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. However, overall, Canada is considered to be a very LGBT-friendly country. Next, let's talk about urban versus rural. While major cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal are generally considered to be the most LGBT-friendly places to live in Canada, smaller towns and cities are becoming more supportive over time. This is due in part to the efforts of local LGBT organizations and the growing visibility of LGBT people in Canadian society. It's important to note that while Canada as a whole is considered to be very LGBT-friendly, Individual communities may vary in their attitudes and acceptance of LGBT people. However, overall, the trend in Canada is towards greater acceptance and inclusion of LGBT people across the country. Next, let's talk about youth. According to a 2021 survey conducted by Statistics Canada, younger generations in Canada are more likely to identify as LGBT than older generations. For example, about 9% of millennials in Canada identify as LGBT compared to 6% of Generation X and 2% of baby boomers. This trend is particularly evident among young men who are more likely to identify as gay or bisexual than previous generations. Additionally, younger Canadians are also more likely to identify as non-binary or gender with Gen Z being the most likely to identify outside the gender binary. This suggests that there has been a significant increase in the visibility and acceptance of non-binary and other gender identities among young Canadians. The growing visibility and acceptance of LGBT people among younger generations is likely due to a number of factors, including increased exposure to diverse gender identities and sexual orientations through media and social interactions, as well as greater awareness and understanding of gender diversity and inclusion. Next, intersectional notes. Canada recognizes the unique experiences and challenges faced by Indigenous peoples who have a long history of discrimination and marginalization. The Canadian government has taken steps to address these issues through initiatives such as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which aims to improve the lives of Indigenous peoples across Canada. Additionally, there are numerous organizations in Canada that support Indigenous LGBT people, such as the Native American Center for Health Professions, which provides culturally appropriate health services to LGBT Indigenous people in Toronto. Canada is a multicultural country, and its queer communities are no exception. Visible minorities make up a significant portion of Canada's LGBT population, and they bring a wide range of perspectives, experiences, and traditions. Many LGBT people from visible minority communities face unique challenges due to the intersection of their sexual orientation, gender identity, and racial or ethnic background. For example, Black LGBT Canadians are disproportionately women who face multiple forms of discrimination based on both their sexual orientation and their race. Similarly, many Muslim LGBT Canadians face discrimination within their religious communities and may struggle to reconcile their faith with their sexual orientation or gender identity. Despite these challenges, there are organizations in Canada that are working to support and empower LGBT people from visible minority communities. For example, the Black Queer Trans People of African Descent Network provides support and resources to Black LGBT Canadians, while the 519 Church Street runs a variety of programs and services for LGBT people from diverse cultural backgrounds. Canada has a long history of recognizing and protecting the rights of LGBT people, making it one of the most LGBT-friendly countries in the world. The country was one of the first to introduce same-sex marriage and has strong laws and policies in place to protect the rights of LGBT people across the country. Overall, Canada is a welcoming and inclusive country that values diversity and equality. Its commitment to social justice and human rights makes it a great place for LGBT people to live, work, and raise a family. If you want to learn more about Canada, check out the links below. And please, let me know if you have any questions or comments. I always appreciate hearing from you, and I will see you next week.